Has been frightened and fascinated by serial killers for decades. Dramas and documentaries about serial killers are binge-watching hits. Ted Bundy, Son of Sam, Jeffrey Dahmer. They're names that will live in infamy.
Have you ever wondered what goes on in the mind of the most dangerous serial killer ever?
FBI, those serial killers could be connected to dozens and dozens of unsolved murders.
Investigators are actively working to track them down by focusing in on a specific pool of suspects.
Jessica Schmidt explains what they're doing now to prevent another person from becoming a victim in this story from the crime line.
The chilling reality is far more terrifying than anything you could imagine.
A 15-year-old girl is kidnapped at gunpoint by a serial killer.
He restrained my wrists and my ankles and then gagged me.
Assaulted and tortured for 18 hours, but somehow she managed to escape.
I wanted him to know that choosing me, that was his biggest mistake.
What if I told you that this killer wasn't born evil, but instead was shaped by a twisted past and a hunger for control?
Growing up in Washington State in the 1980s, Melissa Moore says her childhood was nothing short of idyllic.
I had a stay-at-home mom that adored me, and I had a father that was gone often and was the provider for the family, and I didn't need for anything, and I felt completely loved by my family.
Stay tuned as we uncover the early signs, the hunts, and the anatomy of his brutal killings. But here's the most terrifying part. There's a mystery behind his actions that no one has been able to explain. The truth is lurking, and it's waiting to be discovered. Don't miss out on this chilling exploration into darkness. You might regret it if you do. The early signs of a monster. From a young age, there were hints that something was deeply wrong with him. Growing up in a seemingly ordinary household, he displayed behaviors that were far from typical. His childhood was marked by an unsettling absence of empathy, a detachment from the emotions of others. While most children formed connections with their peers, he kept to himself, often playing alone, engaging in bizarre and violent fantasies. Teachers, friends, and family began to notice the subtle red flags, an intense fascination with animals, particularly with their suffering, and a disturbing inability to feel guilt or remorse. As he reached adolescence, these signs intensified. His fantasies grew darker, more elaborate, as he began to express an eerie fascination with death. Often, he would speak cryptically about feeling powerful over life and death, revealing a disturbing desire to control others. His emotional void seemed impenetrable, and those who came into contact with him were left feeling uneasy, sensing an underlying menace. But it wasn't just his behavior that made him stand out. He was highly intelligent, manipulative, and had an unsettling ability to charm his way into people's lives. On the surface, he appeared to be an average individual, even charming at times. But beneath this mask lay a mind capable of the most heinous acts. The groundwork for what would later become one of the most chilling serial killing sprees in history was being laid in those formative years. The first kill. It was the moment that marked his transformation from a troubled individual to something far more sinister. The first kill was neither an accident nor a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a carefully calculated act, a manifestation of years of repressed anger, twisted fantasies, and an insatiable desire to dominate. The victim, chosen seemingly at random, became an unwitting pawn in his dark game. He stalked them, observed them, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. When it finally happened, it was quick and precise. The victim's life was taken with chilling efficiency, leaving little trace behind. It wasn't just about the physical act of murder, though. It was about control, about feeling the rush of power over life itself. In that moment, he realized what he had been seeking all along: the ultimate sense of mastery. The first kill gave him something that nothing else could. It was a feeling that filled the void he had been living with, a temporary satisfaction of his darkest impulses. But like any addict, once he tasted the power, there was no turning back. The first kill was not an isolated event. It was the gateway to a cycle that would lead to an unspeakable number of lives destroyed. He had crossed a line, and now there was nothing to stop him from continuing down the path of destruction. Psychological triggers behind the madness. Behind every monstrous act lies a complex web of psychological triggers, and for him, it was no different. His mind was a landscape shaped by a lifetime of trauma, neglect, and distorted experiences. From a young age, he lacked the fundamental emotional connections that guide most people's sense of right and wrong. Instead, his early life was filled with feelings of abandonment, humiliation, and a deep sense of inadequacy. These formative experiences shaped his worldview, leading him to see others as tools for his own emotional release. rather than people with their own lives and worth. As he grew older, his need for power and control became more pronounced. His inability to form healthy relationships fueled an obsessive need to dominate those around him. But it wasn't just about control, it was about revenge. In his mind, each victim was a symbol of the world that had rejected him, and each act of violence was a way to take back what he felt he had lost. His twisted worldview justified the horrors he committed. Compounding these internal struggles was a deep-seated resentment toward society. He believed that he was above it, that he had been wronged by a world that refused to acknowledge his greatness. These psychological triggers, the unresolved trauma, the need for control, and the thirst for validation, became the foundation of his brutal crimes. Each act of violence was an attempt to carve out a space for himself in a world that he felt had long since turned its back on him. The hunt, hunting for victims. The hunt was where he truly felt alive. It wasn't merely about the kill itself, it was the chase, the planning, the power he felt while selecting his prey. Each victim was meticulously chosen, not at random, but for their vulnerability. He learned to spot weaknesses in people, their routines, their behaviors, the moments when they were most exposed. It was an art for him, one he honed with terrifying precision. He didn't rush. The hunt was part of the process. It wasn't just about the kill. It was about creating a scenario where he could feel completely in control, where everything unfolded according to his dark design. He would spend days, sometimes weeks, observing his victims, learning their habits, and waiting for the perfect opportunity. His patience was unsettling. The thrill came not from killing instantly, but from knowing he had all the time in the world to make the perfect move. It was during this time that he truly became the predator, silent, calculating, and cold. The victim, unaware, remained oblivious to the danger that loomed close, never knowing that they were being stalked by a master of manipulation. In his mind, this was the ultimate game, a game in which he was always the winner. His ability to blend in, to become invisible in plain sight, made him even more dangerous. His victims never stood a chance, and once the hunt was over, it was not just the physical act of murder that satisfied him. It was the domination, the feeling of having stripped away another person's autonomy. For him, it was a ritual of control, and he reveled in every moment of it. The anatomy of the killings. Each killing was a carefully orchestrated event, with no detail left to chance. The physical act itself was often quick and brutal, but it was the meticulous planning that defined each murder. His victims were never just random targets. They were a means to an end, carefully selected for their vulnerabilities. He studied them, learned their weaknesses, and made sure to strike when they were at their most defenseless. The method of the kill varied, but the execution was always efficient, leaving little to no evidence behind. He reveled in the power of the moment, the feeling of life slipping away at his hands. There was an eerie calmness to his actions. For him, each kill was a reaffirmation of his control, a demonstration of his superiority. It wasn't about the physical act of death. It was about the complete and utter dominance he felt as he took away someone else's life. But the anatomy of his killings went beyond just the physical violence. It was also psychological. He would often leave behind subtle clues or taunt authorities with cryptic messages. It was as if he wanted the world to know that he was in control, that no one could catch him. The thrill came not only from the kill itself, but from the aftermath, the fear, the confusion, the power he wielded over an entire community. Each murder was a step further into his descent, a darker expression of the monster he had become. And in the silence that followed each killing, he felt invincible, as if no one could stop him. But as the bodies piled up, his need for power and recognition grew insatiable. You've now glimpsed inside the mind of one of the most terrifying killers in history. But what's even more unsettling is the question that remains unanswered. Why did he do it? The mind of a killer is a dangerous thing, and sometimes the truth is even darker than we can comprehend. But what if I told you there's another story that's even more chilling? One that involves an entire family lost, and no one knows why. Our next video dives into the horrifying tale of a man who killed his whole family, leaving behind no clear motive. You won't want to miss this one. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to uncover the disturbing truth. The darkness is waiting, and it's closer than you think.